Sawadee-krap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our group learning program, and we're in Chapter 10 of this book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This chapter is titled, What is Merit? I'm going to help you understand what this is and teach it to you because you would need to know what this is and actually be able to practice it in order to actually get to enlightenment. So I'm going to be teaching you what this is and even teaching you some other things along the way and using the words of the Buddha quite a bit to be able to help you see what he taught on this important topic. So I'd like to welcome all of you, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly. The way that we start our classes is we start with meditation. So I'd like to invite you to join for breathing mindfulness meditation. I will guide you through first chanting, and you guys are welcome to join into the chants. Then I'll provide some guidance during the meditation. Then there'll be a period of time where we'll just be meditating together, and then we'll come out of the meditation with some chanting as well. And then that's where I'll start the class of actually teaching you what is merit. And as we go, you guys are always welcome to ask any and all questions as I'm sharing this particular topic with you. So if you'd like to join for meditation, you might take a position, either seated, lying, standing. These are the three that work really well with online learning. There's also a walking position that you can learn as well. So maybe you're sitting comfortable on the floor, in a chair, on a sofa, on a bench, maybe a wheelchair, maybe anywhere that you would like to really sit and make the lower body comfortable, the hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Otang Bhagavanang Abhivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅgho Saṅghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavito Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath. Either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหากวาพุตังภาควันตังอภิวาเทมิ สวากขาโตมหาวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนภะคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหะวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสัคคาโตโรกาวิโตอนุเตโรภูริสาดัมมาสติสัตตาตาวาปานุสรังโอโตภาควาติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation, I'd like to once again welcome all of you guys to today's class. Whether you're joining us for the first time or you've been joining us regularly, or perhaps you joined us since we started meditating, welcome to everyone. Today's class, we're going to be discussing Chapter 10, which is titled, What is Merit? It's in this book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. And you can download this for free from our website. You can take it and go print it. You can get printed versions on our Amazon, or even at the temple here in Chiang Mai. You can get printed versions by just reimbursing us for the printing cost. So welcome to all of you guys to today's class. This topic of what is merit, it involves generosity, where you're learning to give and share more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return, such as your time, effort, energy, and resources. And in order to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to practice generosity. And there's a particular type of generosity referred to as merit, which I'm going to teach you guys what that is. But before we start talking about that, it's important that whenever you're learning about generosity, or even this topic of merit, which involves generosity, it's important to understand what the goal of the teachings of the Buddha is. The goal is to help you get to this peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy, which is the enlightened mind. And in order to do that, you need to eliminate the unwholesome qualities in the mind. One of the primary unwholesome qualities that you're eliminating, as you learned 2 weeks ago, is craving, desire, attachment, the longing, the yearning. And we talked about this during the Four Noble Truths as well, where the mind is craving for things to be a certain way. It's holding on. And if it gets what it wants, it gets those pleasant feelings. And if it doesn't get what it wants, it gets painful feelings. So the Buddha was very thoughtful about how he put together his teachings. He didn't just thoughtlessly put together his teachings. He very thoughtfully put together the teachings about what it takes to actually get to enlightenment. And because he knew for himself that it took a certain amount of generosity from him to be able to train his mind to get to enlightenment, he knew that that was important for anybody else who was interested in getting to enlightenment too. So the Buddha taught generosity of giving and sharing without any expectation of anything in return. And he practiced this extensively throughout his last life, but also even his prior lives too. He talks about in his prior lives how he was very generous. And if it wasn't for that generosity, he wouldn't have been able to get to enlightenment as a Buddha on his own in his very last life. So when you hear me talking about generosity, you're going to see that it's involving practicing generosity towards the continuation of the teachings of the Buddha. It's important to understand that the Buddha wasn't trying to enrich himself. He had already been very rich. He was a prince destined to become a king. He had everything you could imagine in terms of material possessions and wealth. So when he was teaching any kind of generosity, or this generosity which produces merit, it was to be able to help you to be able to get to enlightenment. That's the ultimate goal of any teaching of the Buddha. He puts you as a focal point in the middle of his teachings. He doesn't put any other being like God or anybody else in the center of his teachings, because he's helping you to cultivate wisdom. He's helping you to be able to get to enlightenment. His mind was already peaceful and joyful. He didn't want anything. In fact, once he left the royal palace and he was living as a homeless, roaming ascetic, he would accept offerings like food, clothing, shelter, and medical care, but he didn't even accept gold and silver. He didn't accept a land or animals or slaves or women. Sometimes people would try to offer these kinds of things to him. He didn't even accept these. In fact, one time somebody offered him a very rich and very elaborate fabric, a very fancy fabric, and he accepted it because this is what he teaches, is to accept someone's generosity. But then he turned to one of his students and he asked the student to rip it up and sew it back together and then make a robe out of it, because he wasn't interested in walking around in this very rich, very elaborate and fancy fabric. So this is the way that a Buddha has trained their mind, that they're not interested in material wealth for themselves. But here today, what you're going to learn is this topic of merit, which merit is the readiness and taking action to frequently give something more than is strictly required, such as your time, effort, energy, financial support, resources, and you're not interested in having any expectation of anything in return. Because if you have an expectation, this is still riddled with craving, desire, attachment. And this is generosity that is directed towards the continued support and sharing of the teachings of the Buddha. This is how an individual produces merit. And the Buddha provides certain teachings to help you understand how to make offerings and why it's important to make offerings, the benefits, and I'm going to share all those things with you. Essentially what merit is it's wholesome Kamma generated through generous offerings and gifts. And you're making these offerings to the community of virtuous ordained practitioners or teachers or anybody who's in one of the 4 stages of enlightenment. This is referred to as the Aryan Sangha. This is a Pali word. And what this really essentially means is the noble community, because the Buddha was interested in people supporting those students who were studying the closest and had attained the 4 stages of enlightenment. Because by supporting those individuals, then the teachings could come into the world more and more for everybody to benefit from them. Because if you can imagine during the lifetime of a Buddha, there's going to be countless students learning with that individual. And there's going to be a core group of students around the Buddha who's learning very closely. But then there's going to be people on the fringes who are learning, but they're not really practicing very closely. So when the Buddha talked about making offerings that produce merit, he provided this guidance of making sure you be sure that you think through the decisions that you're making about how you make offerings and who you make offerings to. Because let's just say there was a teacher or ordained practitioner who is smoking or gambling or using substances that cause heedlessness or hitting animals or different things like this. If you were to make offerings to this teacher or this individual, you would be supporting those kinds of things. You might think that every Buddhist monk or every Buddhist teacher is practicing the teachings closely, but that would be permanence. And we understand the universal truth of impermanence, so this just isn't true. So there's going to be some people who are practicing very closely and sharing those teachings, and it's going to be benefiting a lot of people. But then there's going to be other people who maybe aren't doing those things. And the Buddha was interested in making sure you understood the difference. So he gave you guidance on how to determine whether somebody's in one of these 4 stages of enlightenment or not, and be able to make your offering in a way that is going to support an individual who's closely practicing the teaching, so that the teachings could come into the world and benefit as many people as possible. So in order to produce merit, an individual is making offerings such as food, water, clothing, shelter, medical care, time, effort, energy, financial support, and resources. And it's to support the continued sharing of the teachings of the Buddha, and it's supporting the noble community, the people who are responsible to guiding others to the attainment of enlightenment. So I've created this little diagram that will help you to understand the practice of generosity, which is what you're going to need to practice in many different ways, and then the practice of merit, because merit is based in generosity, but it's a unique type of generosity. So the practice of generosity, as I've mentioned, is this giving and sharing, learning to train your mind to let go, to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. That's what generosity is for, is that by living open-handedly, you're taking joy in letting go, and that you're not just pursuing your own selfish desires, because that's what the craving, desire, attachment will want to do, is the craving in your mind will think that everything you do, you need to get something back for it. And that is the craving, desire, attachment. But when you practice generosity without any expectation of anything in return, this is training your mind to eliminate expectations and wants, that you can do something just for the sake of doing something and enhancing the quality of your mind. So you're going to need to practice generosity in a lot of different places, with your friends and family, with your coworkers, with people that you don't know. Maybe you decide you would like to support a temple or a teacher or something like this. This is all a practice of generosity. But when you're practicing generosity, it's important to do so without any expectation of anything in return. Because if you have an expectation, then it's not pure generosity. There's still craving in there. So for example, if you were to hold the door for somebody when you're walking through a store and you open the door to go in and you notice there's someone's behind you, hey, you can hold the door. That's some generosity. It'll take you 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds to hold the door and let somebody else walk through. And that would be a practice of generosity, because you're sharing your time, your effort, your energy, and your resources more than is strictly required without any expectation of anything in return. But you need to be careful that you don't have any expectation of anything in return. Because if you stand there with the expectation that somebody will say thank you when they walk through the door, you'll be frustrated and you'll be annoyed when they walk through and they don't say thank you. Because of the universal truth of impermanence, not everyone is going to say thank you when they walk through the door. Some people will look to you and say thank you, and they'll share their appreciation. But some people won't, because maybe they're engrossed in thoughts about what they're going to do inside the store. Maybe they're going through a tough time in their life, or maybe they just forgot, right? And then maybe they've never been taught to be polite and respectful. So you shouldn't be holding the door because you expect a thank you. So when you're practicing generosity, you shouldn't even have the expectation of a thank you, because when you do that, then your mind is going to get frustrated and agitated and annoyed when you don't get what you want. So in order to practice generosity, you're going to need to do it without any expectation of anything in return. And you're going to need to be sharing regularly and frequently with the people around you, your time, your effort, your energy, and your resources. And as you're practicing this generosity, you can ask yourself this question: was this an offering to a teacher to support the continued sharing of the Buddha's teachings, helping others to attain enlightenment? And if the answer is no, you're experiencing benefit from this practice of generosity. You're experiencing the elimination of craving, desire, attachment in your own mind, because you're training your mind to let go. You're training your mind to not be selfish. And you're also generating these wholesome results in your progress towards enlightenment by eliminating this selfishness or the sensual desire. You're producing wholesome Kamma. But if you practice generosity and it was for the continuation and sharing of the teachings of the Buddha to help others practice and get to enlightenment, if the answer is yes to that question, then you still are receiving benefits, but you're receiving increased benefits because you are eliminating craving, desire, attachment in your own mind. You're still accomplishing that, and you're still accomplishing generating wholesome results in your own progress towards enlightenment, because you're eliminating selfishness and sensual desire. You're cultivating wholesome Kamma, but you're also benefiting others, because you're now helping others to gain access to the teachings of the Buddha so that they can continue to be learning and developing and practicing in order to get to enlightenment. You're making the teachings available for all beings. So we refer to this as merit, that you're practicing generosity for the continuation and sharing of the teachings of the Buddha. And this would be called merit. So there's some things for me to share with you using the words of the Buddha and some other topics related to this that are going to help you in your practice. So these are the words of the Buddha, where he's sharing with you the 8 types of individuals to be able to make your offerings to. It's titled An Unsurpassed Field of Merit for the World. He says, monks, these 8 persons are worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings, worthy of reverential salutation, an unsurpassed field of merit for the world. What 8? The stream enterer, the one practicing for the realization of the fruit of stream entry, the once returner, the one practicing for the realization of the fruit of once returning, the non-returner, the one practice for the realization of the fruit of non-returning, the arahant, the one practicing for the realization of the fruit of arahantship. So I'm just going to pause here. He's pointing to anybody who's in one of the 4 stages of enlightenment, or someone practicing to get into that stage of enlightenment. So stream enter is the first stage of enlightenment. This is going back to chapter 3. The once returner is the second stage of enlightenment. The non-returner is the third stage, and arahant is the 4th stage. So anybody who's in one of these 4 stages of enlightenment would have practiced the teachings and had a certain amount of wisdom that they've cultivated in order to get into one of those stages of enlightenment. And anybody who is practicing for the realization of these, meaning they're maybe not yet a stream enterer, but they're practicing to become a stream enterer. Or maybe they're a stream enterer and they're practicing to become a once returner, right? So these are the 8 individuals that the Buddha encouraged people to support and share offerings with. So he goes on here. He says, these 8 persons, monks, are worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings, worthy of reverential salutation, an unsurpassed field of merit for the world. The 4 practicing the way, the 4 established in the fruit. This is the upright community, composed in wisdom and virtuous behavior or moral conduct. So I'll share with you here what he's referring to as the upright community or the straight community are people who are sharing his teachings. You might think that during a Buddha's lifetime that he's the only game in town and that everybody's learning with him, because if a Buddha was alive during your lifetime, you would probably be interested in studying with that individual. But not everybody understands who a Buddha is and how to determine who a Buddha is. We've talked about this in prior classes, that there's no outward characteristic that identifies someone as a Buddha. You would need to have enough wisdom to know that an individual is a Buddha. And usually that only comes through studying with the individual and learning more and more about what a Buddha actually is. So there were other people that were teaching and sharing teachings, but those teachings didn't lead to enlightenment. And we know that it's the Buddhist teachings that do. That's why they've been around for 2,500 years, because they actually work. So he would refer to his community as the upright community or the straight community, because he knows they're the ones who are practicing the true way to enlightenment. And then he says these people are composed of wisdom and virtuous behavior or moral conduct, because these are the individuals who have cultivated the wisdom of the natural law of Kamma. And because of that, they understand what would be wise in terms of their moral conduct. So he's referring to his community here. For people intent on sacrifice, for living beings seeking merit, making merit that ripens in the acquisitions, what is given to the community bears great fruit. What he's talking about here about making merit that ripens in the acquisitions, the acquisitions are you attaining one of the 4 stages of enlightenment or any of the other attainments on the journey to enlightenment. That's what we mean when we say the acquisitions. Because by you coming in contact with someone who's in one of the 4 stages of enlightenment or practicing to get into one of the 4 stages of enlightenment, it's not anything mystical or magical that if you make an offering to this person, that it's going to immediately benefit you. Of course, you're eliminating craving, desire, attachment in your own mind, but where the real benefit is coming in is that you come in contact with someone who's in one of the 4 stages of enlightenment, and now you can ask them questions and get insight about what it takes to be able to get to that. So it's going to ripen in you acquiring one of the 4 stages of enlightenment. That's what the Buddha is actually saying here, is that you can now learn and grow and develop in order to get to enlightenment yourself by making an offering to somebody in one of these 4 stages. Because just to be able to make an offering to someone in one of these 4 stages, you're going to need to cultivate enough wisdom to determine whether somebody's in one of these 4 stages or not. So that's going to help you right there. And the Buddha says, what is given to the community bears great fruit. What he means by this is that any offerings that you give to a teacher or a ordained practitioner or someone like this, they should be using a certain portion of whatever is offered in order to sustain their own life, like food, clothing, shelter, and medical care. But you should notice that there's things coming back to you. And this isn't an expectation that you should have, but you should just notice this, that any teacher who's truly sharing these teachings in the way that the Buddha taught, they should be offering classes and courses and retreats and books and resources, and they should have a facility to be able to help you, to be able to learn. And all of these things should be offered at no cost, because an individual who's truly enlightened wouldn't slap $1,000, course fee on their course, because right away when you do that, the people who are impoverished and disadvantaged beings, they wouldn't be able to access those teachings because they don't have enough money to pay $1,000 for a 5-day course or a 10-day course or something like this. And those are the people that need the teachings the most, the people who are really struggling in life and lacking resources. So anybody who's enlightened, who's sharing the teachings, they would have loving kindness and compassion for all beings, which is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well, in concern for the misfortune of others. So they wouldn't be interested in slapping a price tag on their classes and courses and retreats, because that immediately provides an obstacle for people in the world that can't afford that. So an individual who's truly enlightened would offer their teachings at no cost, not only because of this reason, but in order to be able to get to enlightenment, students would need to practice generosity. They would need to practice producing merit. And if they're not willing to share their time, effort, energy, and resources for the continued sharing of the teachings of the Buddha, then they haven't learned them close enough. They haven't understood them close enough to be able to understand how to then share them in the world in a way that their students can be practicing generosity to be able to get to enlightenment. So by a teacher being generous and sharing their teachings at no cost, it sets an example for their students to also practice generosity, and it makes the teachings available for countless people in the world. But then it also allows the students, as they choose, to practice generosity as well. So there's this mutual support that is created by everybody practicing generosity, and everybody can work on eliminating craving, desire, attachment, and getting closer and closer to enlightenment. So you shouldn't see a teacher purchasing like Gucci sunglasses and riding in private airplanes and riding in a Lamborghini or a limousine and things like this. They should be using their resources that are being shared with them from their students to be able to then offer the benefit back to the students. And that's why the Buddha is saying what is given to the community bears great fruit, because it's supporting the teachings to come into the world in such a way that countless people can benefit from them. So this practice of merit helps the students to practice generosity, and it helps them to eliminate craving, desire, attachment in the mind, the cause of discontentedness, and the cause of rebirth too, the constant cycle of rebirth. This helps eliminate the stain of selfishness. These are actually the words of the Buddha, where he talks about selfishness as a stain or a pollution. Because we're all taught when we're growing up to like share our toys and to share things, but oftentimes we forget that as we grow older. And oftentimes we're not taught why to share when we're younger. We're just taught to share. But then as we get older and we start accumulating material possessions, we oftentimes become very selfish. And what you would like to do is understand the reason why it's important to practice generosity, which is to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, and it eliminates the stain of selfishness. And then more and more start practicing that from the middle way, right? You can't share excessively where you don't have the basic needs that you need in order to stay in your life. But you also wouldn't be able to never share either, because there your mind would be quite selfish. You would like to come to the middle where you're able to give and share with the people around you. And you might decide to share with a temple or a teacher or ordained practitioners or people like this. As you're investigating the teachings of the Buddha and examining them, you might start developing confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, and the community, because you're going to notice that you can independently verify his teachings, and you'll be able to see as you're practicing them that they're benefiting the mind, that they're helping you to experience more and more peace and more joy. You're noticing that you're less and less angry, you're less and less frustrated, your relationships are going better, you're having more concentration in your mind. This is helping you to eliminate doubt in your practice. And doubt is one of the pollutions or one of the fetters that need to be eliminated. So as you're developing more and more confidence in the Buddha and you're eliminating your doubt, you might decide that you would like to practice generosity to produce merit so that the teachings can be available for other people. In today's society, we have a term for this. It's called pay it forward, right? Like you're benefiting from something only because for 2,500 years, people have been practicing generosity all the way along the way in order to allow the teachings to come into the world and be more and more available for people. And you're benefiting from something that has come about because of the people before you have supported it. And then when somebody's benefiting from something today that they didn't necessarily pay for, sometimes people like to pay it forward where other people after them can learn and grow and develop. So what we choose to do with these teachings and how well we choose to support them will determine whether they're available for other people in the future or not. So as you're eliminating more and more of your doubt from your mind about these teachings, you'll have more and more confidence in them, and you'll see that they've worked for you, and you might be interested in having them work for other people as well and making them available. And that's where the practice of merit comes in, that you're interested in having the teachings be available for other people. There's a certain misunderstanding around merit that oftentimes is practiced, and you'll see this if you go into some temples or some Buddhist communities, that when you make an offering to a teacher or a Dane practitioner, they might do some chanting for a period of time, and then they take this little urn of water and they pour it out, and they think that they're transferring the benefits of merit to somebody else, particularly a dead relative. And you'll see this even here in Thailand. We refer to this as Guat Nam here in Thailand. This is a rite, a ritual, or a ceremony that is done, and it's not what the Buddha actually taught. The thought is that when you do a good deed, that you can transfer that merit to somebody else. And this just isn't actually possible. Because if you understand the benefit of merit is that you are eliminating craving, desire, attachment in your mind, and you can't transfer your lack of selfishness to somebody else. It's just not possible. So this is a misunderstanding that you will see. And what people think is that, if mom or dad or grandparents were doing unwholesome things in their life and they died, now I can do a whole bunch of good things and I can transfer that benefit to them and somehow help them. But if you remember back to last week's class, when I was talking about Kamma, the Buddha shares in his own words that you are the owner, the heir, the relative, the resort of your wholesome or unwholesome Kamma. Whatever actions you do, either wholesome or unwholesome, you are inheriting that. You can't transfer that to somebody else. So this is a misunderstanding that you will see in some places. So if you ever see this, just know that it's a misunderstanding. Sometimes when I go places with students and they're interested in making offerings, the monks will ask them to pour out this water to transfer it to somebody else. And I let the students know that they can do that if they like, but it's not actually true. This isn't what actually transpires. This isn't what the Buddha actually taught. So just understand that in terms of merit. But you might see this being practiced in different places. In terms of making an offering, you can see the words of the Buddha here that he's giving you guidance on how to make an offering and who to make an offering to. Some more guidance around who to make an offering to. So he talks about these 3 factors to purify your offering as the donor, someone who's making an offering. And he has many teachings on this, and this is just one aspect of it. He talks about the donor should be joyful before giving. Essentially, you should put some thought into what it is that you're going to offer and be joyful about that offering. And then when you're making that offering, the mind should be calm and confident in the act of giving. Because sometimes when you're making an offering to a teacher or somebody that you respect, you might be kind of shaken up by that. And that's because of the mind's craving, desire, attachment. So you like to be calm and confident. You would like to be joyful, calm, and confident all during your life. By the time you get to enlightenment, that's the case. But here the Buddha is giving you guidance that even when you're making offerings, be sure your mind is joyful before giving. Make sure it's calm and confident in the act of giving. And then after you've given, be sure your mind's joyful there as well. And he's talking to a female here, so he's using the pronoun she, but you could apply any pronoun here that you like. Essentially, what he's guiding you to do is not only put some thought into your offering, not only be calm and confident while you're in the act of giving, but afterwards be joyful as well so that you don't have remorse, right? Like you could get to the end of your offering and be like, oh my goodness, I gave too much. Why did I give so much? I don't have food for myself now, right? Or, oh my goodness, I should have gave more. Why was I so selfish? I could have given more and I didn't do that. I should have given more. So if you put some thought into your offering before giving and after giving, and you have this joy in the mind before and after giving, it'll protect your mind from having this remorse, right? So you can put some thought into whatever you're doing. And when you're making offerings, the Buddha talks about doing it frequently and often, because what you'll notice is just like with meditation, that the frequency is more important than the duration of meditation. The same thing is true about generosity. The frequency is more important than the amount. So let's just say you're going to donate, 20 hours a year at an orphanage. And just say you do that like 2 days. Like you just go twice a year and you donate 10 hours to an orphanage. That is not as beneficial as if you gave like 1 hour a week, for example, because there's more frequency. Or say you were going to donate like $500 to an organization or to a temple or a teacher or something. Rather than doing that once a year, it's actually better to do it more frequently, smaller amounts more frequently, where once a week or once a month, you can be donating to a particular place because it's training your mind to let go more frequently. You're going to see here in a moment that the Buddha actually teaches you to practice generosity daily. It's a daily practice because then it's constantly training your mind to let go, let go, let go, let go, let go, right? Whereas if you only practice generosity once a year, that one moment that you're training your mind to let go is not as powerful as if you did smaller increments frequently over the course of the weeks and months and years. So then he talks about, in terms of developing merit, the types of individuals that you would like to make offerings to. Remember, there's generosity that you can practice to anybody and everybody in the world that you would like to practice generosity with. But then there's this merit. And when you're producing merit, he gives more guidance on the types of individuals that you should look for. He says the recipient should be free of craving or are practicing for the removal of craving, free of anger or practicing for the removal of anger, free of ignorance or the unknowing of true reality, or practicing for the removal of ignorance. So when the mind is free of craving, anger, and ignorance, this is an individual who's enlightened. That's what he's talking about there. Because if you're supporting an enlightened being, this is like one of the best things you could ever do, because now you're coming in contact with someone that deeply knows the teachings. And you can also practice where you're sharing offerings with someone who's practicing for the removal of anger, of craving, anger, and ignorance. This is someone who's working to eliminate the pollutions of mind, as we talked about in the prior class of the 3 poisons or 3 unwholesome roots. This is something that an individual who understands craving, anger, and ignorance, they can see it very clearly, whether someone has it or doesn't. But for an individual who's just getting started to learn on the path to enlightenment, you might not be able to easily figure out whether someone's free of craving, anger, and ignorance or practicing for the removal of craving, anger, and ignorance. So the Buddha gives guidance on this to be able to help you understand in easy, simple terms of who to make an offering to. And the way that he talks about this is that you should look at the quality of an individual's mind. You can observe the quality of their mind, not in a judgmental way, but just looking at the quality of someone's mind. Because if someone's mind is what the Buddha refers to as muddle-minded, meaning lacking concentration, confused, things like this, they're going to be stumbling over their words constantly because their mind is polluted and they don't understand the teachings very closely because they're not practicing the teachings very closely. So if you see somebody who isn't able to speak well and whose mind is confused, they have a lack of memory, a lack of concentration, they're not able to explain the teachings in very easy, simple terms, then more likely than not, they're not practicing very closely. So this is some of the guidance that he provides you to be able to help you understand this. So there's these kinds of things that can help you. But then the more you understand craving, anger, and ignorance, you would be able to understand that and be able to make decisions about who to share your offerings with, because you would like to support people who are closely practicing the teachings. And this will help the teachings become more and more available to other people in the world and benefit countless people. Then there's something that the Buddha shares called the way of practice. The way of practice is a simplification of the teachings and helping you to understand what to do on a day-to-day basis. Because already in this group learning program, even though we're only about halfway through, you've learned a tremendous amount of things. And I'm not sure how much of that you've integrated into your life, because oftentimes it takes quite a while to integrate these teachings into your life. You've learned the 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, some meditation training, chanting, and things like this. And now you're starting to learn other topics as well of different things that you're going to need to learn and grow and develop in order to get to enlightenment. So when you're learning all these different teachings of the Buddha, you're probably going to need to learn it more than one time in order for it to really soak in. And as you're doing that, you also are trying to kind of maybe figure out like, what can I do on a day-to-day basis to get to enlightenment? Of course, there's the Eightfold Path, and that's what you'll need to practice. And you'll need to practice meditation and things like this. But the Buddha provides you this way of practice. It's a simplification of the teachings. Once you know the teachings and you understand them, it's a way to boil it down into what should I be doing every single day in order to get to enlightenment. And this is called the way of practice. And he talks about generosity, which is that giving and sharing of your time, effort, energy, and resources without any expectation of anything in return. And then he talks about this moral conduct. The moral conduct is right speech, right action, and right livelihood from the Eightfold Path. Because if you're interested in getting to enlightenment and you're going out into the world and you're not practicing wholesome moral conduct, that means you're still causing harm. And that's going to produce unwholesome results. And that means there's more harm coming back to you. So for that analogy that I used last week about the garden hose and the mud, if you're still putting mud in your garden hose, that's more mud that you've got to get out. So sure, you're putting water into the garden hose, but you're also probably putting mud into this garden hose too. So on a day-to-day basis, you would like to be improving your moral conduct and bringing that closer and closer to wise choices and wholesome conduct. And then on a day-to-day basis, you would like to be doing meditation. And that's where I teach 2 to 3 meditations a day for 30 minutes or more. And of course, it's going to take you 6 months, a year, maybe even 2 years to build up to that. So you would like to be meditating on a day-to-day basis. So this is called the way of practice of what is going to propel you towards enlightenment, because with generosity, you're training your mind to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. With the moral conduct, you're also working to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, and shutting down your unwise choices around moral conduct so you're not producing unwholesome results. And then with your loving kindness meditation and your breathing mindfulness meditation, you're working to eliminate craving and anger with those meditations as well. So this is a daily, consistent basis where you're consistently working to eliminate craving, anger, and ignorance. So all of this gets put into motion through generosity. That's what merit is. If it wasn't for the practice of generosity to support the teachings of the Buddha, then we wouldn't be able to learn the moral conduct. We wouldn't be able to learn the meditations, because it's generosity that is the catalyst that allows an individual like me and others to be able to share these teachings. Because if we had a job on the side where we were running a business, or I was a manager at an IT company or something, I wouldn't have the time to spend sharing these teachings in the way that I do, in all the different things that I do to be able to help students. So the Buddha taught his teachers that we should let go of this worldly pursuits and really focus on sharing the teachings with others. And that's a choice that we get to make. There's obviously some people who are choosing to do both. And I actually had to do that for about 1.5 years or so. I was working, doing other things while I was writing books and creating presentations and courses and retreats and things like that. And sometimes that's what you need to do, is slowly bring down one part of your life and slowly build up another part of your life. And you can even do this if you're changing careers or things like this. But even Buddhist teachers do these kinds of things. But it's generosity that puts all this other stuff in motion, where you can learn the moral conduct, the meditation, and all the other teachings that it's going to take to get to enlightenment. And it's helping you on a day-to-day basis to be able to get to enlightenment as well. Then there's some teachings here that the Buddha shares about giving and sharing. And this was a very impactful teaching for me when I saw the words of the Buddha the first time. So I typically share this when I talk about this topic. This one is titled, "If Beings Knew the Results of Giving and Sharing." So I'll help you understand this through the words of the Buddha. He says, "Monks, if beings knew, as I know, the results of giving and sharing, they would not eat without having given, nor would the stain of selfishness obsess them and take root in their minds. Even if it were their last bite, their last mouthful, they would not eat without having shared it, if there were someone to share it with. But because beings do not know, as I know, the results of giving and sharing, they eat without having given, and the stain of selfishness obsesses them and takes root in their minds." What the Buddha is talking about here in terms of if beings knew as I know the results of giving and sharing, what he's talking about is if beings knew that the enlightened mental state is so peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy, and if they knew that it was generosity that leads to this enlightened mental state, they would not eat without having shared it if there was someone to share it with, even if it was their last bite. But because beings do not know how peaceful and joyful this enlightened mental state is, they eat without having given, and the state of selfishness obsesses them and takes root in their minds. So the Buddha is talking about how the enlightened mental state needs generosity in order to be able to get there. And if you truly understood just how peaceful the enlightened mental state is, and there was this practice that you needed to employ in order to accomplish that, you would share generosity, you would practice generosity with the people around you, and this is going to help you. This is going to be a catalyst to helping you eliminate your craving, desire, attachment. Here's a teaching from the Buddha where he talks about the 5 benefits of giving. Monks, there are these 5 benefits of giving. What 5? 1 is dear and agreeable to many people. Wholesome persons go in large numbers to one or to you. 1 acquires a wholesome reputation. 1 is not deficient in the householder's duties. With the breakup of the body after death, 1 is reborn in a good destination, in a heavenly world. These are the 5 benefits of giving. By giving, 1 becomes dear. 1 follows the duty of the wholesome. The wholesome mentally disciplined monks always go in large numbers to 1. They teach 1 the teachings that dispels all discontentedness, having understood which, the taintless 1 here attains nibbana, or enlightenment. So there's 5 benefits that the Buddha is talking about here. These aren't the only 5 benefits of practicing generosity, but they're some of the 5 benefits. And when you're practicing generosity, it's important that you don't expect these things. But the Buddha, remember, is teaching you this cause and effect, or this action and result. He's helping you see the natural law of Kamma as it relates to all aspects of giving and sharing and everything else that he teaches about the natural law of Kamma, like moral conduct and meditation and all these other things. He's showing you the cause or the action, and he's showing you the effect or the result. So here he's giving you 5 things, but there's other things that are beneficial as well. And when you're practicing generosity, it's important that you don't expect these things. But as you're practicing generosity, you will come to see that these things are true, and this will help you to build confidence in his teachings, and you'll be able to see this natural law of Kamma more and more closely. So for example, if you're practicing generosity in your work environment, maybe instead of just going out and getting a bag of chips for yourself or a chocolate bar or a milkshake or something, maybe you go out and you buy some for other people in the office too, and you share some bagels or some donuts or some fruit or some things like this. What you'll notice if you're doing that regularly is that you will build a wholesome reputation amongst your community. Or say you're sharing food with your neighbors in your community. You're going to see that you're going to build a wholesome reputation. Again, this isn't what you're interested in acquiring. The only reason why you should be practicing generosity is to enhance the quality of your mind, knowing that it eliminates craving, desire, attachment. But the Buddha is helping you to be able to see this, because as you're practicing generosity and you're noticing this wholesome reputation and people find you to be dear and agreeable and things like this, you'll understand why. It's because of your generosity. Now notice in number 5 where he talks about with the breakup of the body after death, 1 is reborn in a good destination in a heavenly world. It's important to understand that the Buddha here is not teaching that that's the ultimate goal of his teachings. The ultimate goal is to get to enlightenment and escape the discontentedness and escape the cycle of rebirth. Those beings in the heavenly realm, they're still stuck in the cycle of rebirth, and it's not a permanent existence. Unfortunately, many people think heaven is permanent, but you understand the universal truth of impermanence by now if you've been studying with me for a while, and you know that the heavenly realm is not permanent because you can see the universal truth of impermanence all around you. So these beings in the heavenly realm, they're oftentimes complacent, and they tend to not apply effort and energy to get to enlightenment, even though they have the ability to do that. Here in the human realm, it's the ideal existence because we have built-in motivation. When you experience painful feelings like anger and sadness or stress or anxiety or loneliness or boredom or guilt, shame, or fear, you don't like those feelings and you're interested in getting away from them. So in the human realm, it's the ideal existence because you have this built-in motivation. So the Buddha isn't dangling a carrot here and saying, hey, come on, let's get to heaven, make some generosity and give me some money. Because remember, he was already rich. He didn't even accept money. He didn't accept land or anything like this. But instead, he's just teaching you how to be able to get to enlightenment through eliminating craving, desire, attachment. And the same things that it takes to get to enlightenment, if you fall short, one of the things is that you will be potentially reborn in the heavenly world. That's one of the things. So this is just one of many benefits that he teaches. Here he's just sharing 5 benefits, but this isn't the only 5. There's others as well. So the fact that an individual may be reborn in the heavenly world, that is just a true fact. That is just the way the natural law of Kamma functions. But that shouldn't be the purpose of why somebody's practicing generosity. Instead, you should practice for the enhancement of the quality of the mind, and just understand that whenever you see something about being reborn into the heavenly world, the Buddha isn't encouraging you to do that. He's just helping you to see that if you fall short of enlightenment for any reason, there's this potential to be reborn there. But still, in the heavenly realm, you need to get to enlightenment. There's still work you need to do there as well. So this is the 5 benefits of giving that the Buddha shares. Then there's this teaching here, which is titled Gifts of Teachings is Superior Than Gifts of Material Things. He says, monks, there are these 2 kinds of gifts, a gift of material things and a gift of the teachings. Of these 2 kinds of gifts, this is supreme, a gift of the teachings. There are these 2 kinds of sharing of material things and sharing of the teachings. Of these 2 kinds of sharing, this is supreme, sharing of the teachings. There are these 2 kinds of assistance with material things and assistance with the teachings. Of these 2 kinds of assistance, this is supreme, assistance with the teachings. So essentially, he's sharing that you could give your family members all the material things that you could imagine, a new house, a new car, lots of money, all these different material things, but that pales in comparison to the gift of the teachings, because giving the gift of the teachings is to be able to help somebody to be able to eliminate discontent feelings. That's one of the best gifts that you could ever give to anybody, the elimination of anger and sadness and frustration and all these other discontent feelings. Unfortunately, you can't, give somebody enlightenment. If there was a button that you could press where you could press this button and somebody would stay angry and bitter and harsh the rest of their life, and maybe your mom or dad or brothers and sisters and other people that are close to you, if you press that button, they would stay bitter and harsh the rest of their life. Or you could press this button and they would become peaceful and joyful for the rest of their life. Ask yourself, which button would you press, right? It would probably be this second one, right? You'd be interested in seeing people be peaceful and joyful for the rest of their life. Unfortunately, we can't press a button, and we can't do that in order to help somebody to be peaceful and joyful. They have to do the work. But the teachings need to be available for people to do the work. So practicing generosity that produces merit makes the teachings available. This is like giving the gift of the teachings, that you can now give this gift to other people, that you're making the teachings available for others. And that's why the Buddha taught the development of generosity in order to produce merit, because you're giving this gift, you're sharing, and you're providing this assistance for people to be able to access the teachings. And this is one of the reasons why I teach, because I know that in terms of the rest of my life, this is the very best thing that I could ever give anybody, is a gift of these teachings, sharing these teachings, assistance with these teachings. It's the very best thing I could ever do for anybody, is to help you to be able to get to this enlightened mental state where the mind can be utterly peaceful and utterly joyful. So here's the very last thing that I'll share, and then I'll open up to any questions that you guys have on this topic, is the Buddha shares this mutual support between monks, Brahmins, and householders. I'm not sure if you've heard me describe what a Brahmin is, but I'll share this with you so that you know before I read this. What a Brahmin is today we would probably refer to this person as a Hindu priest, that during the lifetime of the Buddha, there were people that were born into a certain family. There was a caste system in place. And if you were born into this particular family, which was about 15% of society, that they thought that you were a holy person because you were born into this family. And now the other 85% of the community, they were taught that they were impure and that they needed to come to these Brahmin in order to do rites and rituals and ceremonies and worship, and their life would become better if they would get these rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship from these Brahmin. And these Brahmin would charge money, right? So maybe today you show up and it's $5, and now they do some ceremony, and then you're supposed to go home and your life's going to get better. But then the next day you would come and it's $10, and you'd be like, why? Well, because I said so. and you can't do anything about it, right? Because in our minds, we were taught that we couldn't do anything to change our life, right? So the Buddha saw this, and he knew that it was unwise, and he knew it wasn't actually beneficial, because in order for you to improve your life, you need to cultivate wisdom. You need to make better decisions. You need to train your mind. So that's what the Buddha was teaching. But there were still these other people over here doing all these rites or rituals and ceremonies and worship. And the more that the Buddha taught, the ability for these Brahmin to support themselves went down, because less and less people were giving them money to do these rituals and ceremonies. So these Brahmin would oftentimes come and learn with the Buddha, because while they were doing these rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, they were also teaching just a little bit of moral conduct here and there. So they would sometimes come to the Buddha to be able to learn these things. So the Buddha here is talking to the ordained practitioners. He says, monks, Brahmins, and householders are very helpful to you. They provide you with the requisites of robes, alms food, lodgings, and medicines in time of sickness. And you monks are very helpful to Brahmins and householders as you teach them the teachings that are good in the beginning, the middle, and the end, with the correct meaning and wording, and you proclaim the spiritual life in its fulfillment in complete purity. Thus, monks, this spiritual life is lived with mutual support for the purpose of crossing the flood and making a complete end of discontentedness. So here what he's talking about is this mutual support between ordained practitioners and teachers and their students. And this is the way the Buddha set things up from during his lifetime. Because again, if he taught these people that were really close to him how to get to enlightenment, and their mind is so utterly peaceful and joyful, and they're off running a business, or they're, doing all these different things to make money, they may not be incentivized to actually share the teachings. Not everybody who's going to get to enlightenment will share the teachings. Some people will be business people or police officers or politicians or different things that are, available for occupations in the world. Enlightened beings can be all of these things, but there'll be some people who are teaching. So if the teachers were off making money and acquiring resources in other ways, they might not have been so dedicated to their students. So the Buddha is teaching monks and ordained practitioners and teachers to share without any expectation of anything in return, so that now the teachings can come into the world through those individuals practicing generosity. And then he's teaching the students to practice generosity as well, so that then they can actually improve the condition of their mind, getting closer and closer to enlightenment by eliminating craving, desire, attachment. So there's this mutual support. So the Buddha instituted this so that the people who are learning the closest would actually come in contact with people who needed the teachings. Because as a household practitioner, you're out there doing all kinds of things in work and your personal life and all these different things, and you're going to need access to the teachings. And he was making sure that the people who were learning the closest would still come in contact with those people who need the teachings, because you're out there going through all various kinds of struggles and difficulties. You're going to need the wisdom of how to learn and grow and develop and practice. So he created this mutual support where there's this mutual exchange of generosity, that the students are practicing generosity, and then the ordained practitioners and teachers are also practicing generosity. In this way, the teachings are made available for all people in the world without any kind of financial obstacle. So this is what I typically teach in terms of helping you guys to understand what is merit. And you guys can ask me any and all questions about this topic that you like by putting this into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any and all questions that you like. And while you're thinking about any particular questions that you might have, I would like to just share something with you here. First, I would like to share with you that anybody who practices generosity with me, I would like to be sure that you have my deepest appreciation and gratitude. And when you're sharing generosity with me, I always make an effort to ensure that I say thank you for your generosity. So thank you to anybody who supports the work that I'm sharing, because it is no cost to be able to share these teachings in terms of I make them available at no cost. But there is a certain expense for me to be able to share these teachings. So I appreciate any support that anybody's giving me in order to be able to share these teachings. And at the same time, I would like to be sure you understand that there's no expectation on my side for anybody to share anything with me ever. Instead, I'm just interested in sharing the teachings with anybody who has a sincere interest in learning and practicing these teachings. But if you do decide to share with me at any point, just know that I use those resources to be able to help others, helping you and helping others to be able to share these teachings. There are people who share with me and they're able to practice generosity and they choose to do that based on their own choices. And that helps me to sustain my life and also helps me to acquire the things that I need to be able to share these teachings. But there's also people that are unable to practice any kind of generosity with me, particularly at this time in their life. And the people that do share with me, it provides me the opportunity to help everybody and anybody. I have some students who, for example, are in a small remote village in Africa that they live off of $50 a month and they can barely pay for their own food, but they're able to learn with me because they have an internet connection and they can learn these teachings. So the people who do support me, it allows me to support everybody and anybody, no matter what their financial background is or what country they live in or anything like that, that I can help countless people because of the support that people are helping me. So if you ever choose to support anything that I'm doing, I would just like to share my appreciation and gratitude for that and help you to understand that your offerings are going towards the benefit of sharing these teachings into the world. And I really appreciate and have gratitude and respect for anybody who has kindness and generosity to be willing to share with me. But I, of course, know that not everybody has that ability. So there's no expectation on my side that anybody ever shares anything with me. And I'm more than willing to share with you as all the way throughout your life, no matter what you ever choose to either share or not share with me. So thank you all for your generosity. If you've shared any generosity, and even for those of you guys that haven't done that, I would like to thank you for your dedication and your diligence to learning and practicing these teachings, because it's helping you, it's helping those close to you, and it's helping all of humanity as your mind's becoming more and more peaceful and more joyful. So I'll open up to any and all questions that you guys have related to this topic. Like you probably know if you've been attending these classes regularly, is that you can put this into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any and all questions that you like. Okay, so we have some things coming in here on YouTube. Let's see here. From Yosef, he says, may you give examples about sharing time, effort, and energy? Sure. So like there's students of mine who donate their time to edit a podcast, for example. They will let me know that they're interested in maybe helping out with things, and they ask, do I have anything that they can help with? And podcast editing is something I can send them a file. They can share their time, effort, and energy to edit that, and then they send it back to me, and then I publish it. Or there's people here at the temple that come to learn, and they'll sweep, or they will clean the bathroom, or they will do things around the temple to make it nicer. This is sharing your time, effort, energy to be able to do that. And this is to produce merit. But you can also share your time, effort, and energy as just a practice of generosity. Say you're walking outside and you see your neighbors in their front yard struggling with a trash can that got knocked over and the trash is spread all throughout their yard. Well, you could share your time, effort, energy in terms of just practicing generosity by going over there and helping them to pick that up. It would maybe take 5 minutes or 10 minutes or so, right? And maybe you're just a little bit delayed in where you're going, but nonetheless, you've helped a neighbor. And then you're producing wholesome Kamma, that in your mind, you're having less craving, desire, attachment. And it's also helping you to build a wholesome reputation and help you to build a relationship with your neighbor. So you can be sharing your time, effort, and energy in lots of different places as you navigate the world, either with friends or family or people you don't even know, or even with a temple or a teacher to be able to produce merit. And you can find the ways that make sense for you. Like I mentioned, you could donate your time at an orphanage, maybe cooking or cleaning or helping the children. You could donate your time at a homeless shelter or a women's abuse shelter. You can donate material possessions at places like clothing and things like this. There's all kinds of ways to practice generosity. One of the things that I used to do a lot until I had some challenges with my health is I used to donate blood. This is something that doesn't cost you anything. And it's a resource, right? It's a time, effort, energy, and resource, because it took a certain amount of time for me to go do this. And it was a resource that I was sharing. And I would just go and I would get hooked up, and it would take me whatever amount of time to donate the blood. And then I was able to help other people through this, right? And this is anonymous giving where you're not expecting anything. But here in Thailand, and I think other places as well, when you donate blood, they do give you things. They gave me like drinks and food and things like this, like a little snack is almost like a little, like half of a lunch to be able to rebuild your energy now that you've given blood. So I didn't expect those things, but that's what they give you on your way out. You get this little care package that they give you. So you can do these kinds of things in lots of different places, and you can be creative with this and benefit different groups and different people in different ways. Okay, so I see some other comments there on YouTube, but those aren't questions. So let me see if we have anything on Facebook. Here on Facebook, Mayuli is asking a question. Sir, when doing loving kindness meditation, can this be considered as practicing generosity? This is a practice to help you train your mind in order to eliminate anger, hatred, ill will, and all those lesser versions. Generosity is when you're giving and sharing with others. This loving kindness meditation is for your own mind. It's not for others. Of course, by you training your own mind, it is helping others that they're not going to have to deal with your anger or your frustration or anything like this, but it's not generosity in the way that the Buddha is teaching you. It is developing wholesome Kamma, though. This is the second highest quality of wholesome Kamma that you can generate, with developing your mind with breathing mindfulness meditation as the highest quality of wholesome Kamma, in loving kindness meditation as the second highest quality. So practicing generosity is also producing wholesome Kamma, but it's giving and sharing with others your time, effort, energy, and resources. And then Mayuli asked another question here on Facebook. She says, when one gives to homeless and noticed an individual was being ungrateful and one fell lesser version of annoyance, but quickly realized that this mind need to give conditionally, and the mind was able to let go, will this generosity produce fruit? So any kind of generosity is helpful, but if you have expectations and wanting things from people, there's still craving in there. So you're not generating the highest quality of wholesome Kamma here. So you would like to get to the point where you're not expecting others to be a certain way. So if somebody is ungrateful with the generosity, that's okay. That's affecting them, right? Don't allow it to affect your own mind. Instead, just give and share without any expectation of anything in return. But the Buddha does teach you to be conscious and aware of the type of people that you make offerings to or you practice generosity with. So for example, say you're going to just practice generosity towards an orphanage, right? You would like to research that orphanage. Is it a real orphanage? Do they actually have children there? What are they doing with the children? What kind of activities do they have? You're not interested in just mindfully or mindlessly, thoughtlessly putting money over into someone's bank account that just claims they have a orphanage and they have a website, because it could be a scam, right? So you would like to investigate what this orphanage is doing and how the money is being spent. And that's with like something like generosity. And the same thing's true when you're supporting a teacher or an ordained practitioner or a temple. You would not like to have the expectation that something specific is going to be happening with the funds or the resources that you're sharing, but you would like to be able to see that they're being used in a thoughtful way. That if you're sharing with a teacher or with a temple or something like this, you should see things coming back to the community, not with expectation. You shouldn't have any expectation that these things occur, but you should just notice that they're having, certain events, they're having a nice facility, they're making teachings available to people. These are the types of things that you would see if you're practicing merit with a group of people that are truly bringing the teachings into the world in a way that's benefiting all beings. So we have a question here from Julia. She says, thank you so much, Teacher David, for your generous guidance. Why does the mind crave so much? After obtaining something, we keep craving the next thing. Does practicing generosity help with this? The reason why the mind keeps craving is because of that ignorance or the unknowing of true reality, the lack of wisdom, the confusion, the misunderstanding. The mind, because of its lack of wisdom, it thinks that if it acquires this material thing, that it's going to make everything better. So this is that unquenchable thirst. The mind thinks, if I can just get more money, that'll make everything better in my life. Let me just get more money. And the mind will chase that for a while. And then you'll get happy temporarily. But then your mind will end up in the painful feelings again. That's why we see rich people and famous people killing themselves, because they have painful feelings. One of the biggest myths about the world is that money leads to happiness. this isn't actually true, or rich people would never ever commit suicide. Same thing if someone thought that being famous leads to happiness. If that was true, famous people would never commit suicide because they don't have painful feelings, right? Everybody would be happy who is famous and rich, but this isn't actually true. It's not true reality. So because of the mind's lack of wisdom, it thinks that money or a new car, a new house, a new boyfriend, a girlfriend, having children, having all these different things, some jewelry or something like this, some new job, it's going to provide lasting satisfaction. So it chases after it. It's ignorance or unknowing of true reality. The mind thinks the next new shiny object waiting around the corner is going to provide some lasting satisfaction. So the mind keeps chasing after it. So that's why, in addition to meditation, and in addition to practicing generosity, which yes, this will help you, you need to have the wisdom to be able to see what craving, desire, attachment is, and that it doesn't provide lasting satisfaction. It's just the mind craving and craving and craving, this unquenchable thirst, thinking the next new shiny object is going to produce some kind of satisfaction. And the thing is that when the mind chases with craving, when it acquires its craving, when it gets what it wants, it gets happy. So temporarily, it kind of reinforces to the person that, hey, it was worthwhile to chase this particular thing, because for a few minutes or for a few hours or a few days, you got those pleasant feelings. And the mind's like, that was worthwhile. But you don't see necessarily on the opposite side of that, there's painful feelings waiting for you. So for example, if you chase after a job, you might chase after that job and you might ultimately get it. You might be so happy that you got this job. But then 5 years later, when you get laid off or the company goes out of business and you're feeling miserable and horrible because of that, that's because of those conditional pleasant feelings that the mind acquired through craving and chasing after it. So when you're able to see this correlation, that when you allow your mind to get these conditional pleasant feelings, there is going to be painful feelings. It's only a matter of time because those conditions are going to change. The impermanence is going to happen, and your craving still being intact is going to end up in the painful feelings. So there is no secrets on the path to enlightenment, but if we would like to describe it as a secret or a best practice or something that people oftentimes overlook about the path to enlightenment, it's this, that you need to be able to see the conditional pleasant feelings as part of the problem because they're only temporary, that the mind will arise those pleasant feelings that are conditional. And then waiting on the other side of that is the painful feelings. So just like you get aware of the bodily sensations associated with the painful feelings, and you need to cut that off and let it go, you need to become just as aware of the bodily sensations associated with the conditional pleasant feelings and train the mind to cut those off and let them go so you don't allow the mind to get a conditional pleasant feeling. The mind needs to be willing to let go of this temporary happiness in order to get to the permanent happiness. You're not going to be able to get to the permanent joy and the permanent peace as long as the mind keeps chasing after these temporary pleasant feelings. And this is kind of counterintuitive for most people when they're starting the path to enlightenment, because usually what you enjoy the most out of life is that excitement and that happiness. But when you're getting it through conditional experiences, that means that it's only temporary. So therefore it's dissatisfying and your mind's going to ultimately end up in the painful feelings. So if you can train your mind to get to the point where you cut off and let go of conditional pleasant feelings, not allowing the mind to do that, then you'll ultimately get to the permanent happiness, the permanent joy, the unconditioned joy. So yes, the generosity is going to help you do that because you're training your mind to let go, to let go, to let go. And that's what you're ultimately working to accomplish. So this isn't a secret, but this is really an overlooked thing that people aren't understanding on the path to enlightenment, is to cut off and let go of those conditional feelings. Because as long as you allow the mind to form conditional feelings based on some condition, it's going to keep doing that. It's going to keep dwelling in that. So if you can watch those bodily sensations, whether they're pleasant feelings, painful feelings, or neither painful nor pleasant, and the mind's about to get a conditioned feeling, and you can cut it off and say, nope, I'm not going to allow you to do that. You're disciplining the mind. You're controlling the mind. And more when you do that, it won't do it anymore. So the breathing mindfulness meditation and the generosity is training your mind to let go. And this is going to take many years to train the mind to do this, but it's a permanent fix. It's a permanent solution that once you get to enlightenment, your mind will never experience any painful feelings ever again. and your mind will just only be joyful and be cheerful and bright and uplifted. You'll have a cheerful disposition. But if you allow the mind to dwell in those conditional pleasant feelings, you're going to experience the painful ones at some point. So cutting those off and cutting those off and cutting those off. And it's the breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity that's going to help you to do that. All right, great discussion there, guys. Let's see if we have anything else coming in. Okay, I'm not seeing anything else, any other questions. So what I'll do here is I'll just end by thanking all of you guys for joining. Again, thank you for your generosity. I appreciate all the sharing that you guys do to help me to be able to do the things that I do and support me to be able to share the teachings with you. And next week on Sunday, we're going to be in chapter 11 of this book, which is titled Meditation, Developing Your Practice. This is where we're going to go through and I'm going to teach you all the different meditations that the Buddha taught, which are 4 specific meditations. We're going to go into detail about each one of these meditations, and I'm going to help you to understand how they work to eliminate certain unwholesome qualities and cultivate certain wholesome qualities in the mind. So that's going to be next Sunday. And remember, you can attend live either 9 a.m. or 9 p.m., or you can watch the recordings if you're not able to attend live. And then on this Wednesday, I'm going to be doing breathing mindfulness meditation with students and opening up to any and all questions. Now what I'm doing is I'm rotating on Wednesdays, where one Wednesday I'll do breathing mindfulness meditation and open up to questions, and then one Wednesday loving kindness meditation and open up to any and all questions that you guys would like. So we have various courses and classes and retreats that are being taught over the course of the month and over the course of the year. You can find all of these on our website at buddhadailywisdom.com. It's a real central hub where you can get access to the books and the podcast and the YouTube videos and the classes and courses and retreats and all these things. And you can even schedule personal guidance to be able to meet and talk about the teachings privately and apply them to your specific life. So thank you all for joining, and perhaps I'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Take care. Be well. Sawadee Kap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.